Hey, y'all, it's your friendly neighborhood advisor, Alexander Quinn here, and today we'll be talking about financial mistakes that I made in my 20s. All right, so mistake number one is not constantly looking for better employment. I treated a job as my only job, and my real job was to obtain a salary for my needs, whether that be my lifestyle or saving up to invest. I wasn't smart enough to do that at the time. Whatever it was that I needed to do at the time, I just needed to make more salary than what I was making. I did want to save up to get a house, and I just wasn't doing that very well. And part of my job should have been to look for other employment. I wasn't working 40 hours a week for a lot of it, and if you're working 40, it can be hard, and so I wouldn't expect anyone to go out and look for another job. But if you're working less than 40 and you are intent on working 40 or whatever amount of hours you plan on working, you should consider any additional hours you have after your regular job to be looking for a job. So if you work 32 hours, then 3 hours that week, I recommend going and looking for better employment because that's how you make more money. Statistically, numbers show that people tend to make more money when they switch jobs than if they stay at their job long term. You get raises based on how much experience you have when you are hired, but it is difficult to get raises once you are actually employed unless there is a plan in place that outpaces inflation. And not a lot of jobs have that unless you work for volunteer companies that do volunteer work and such. And usually those companies pay you less anyway. Some small businesses that are pretty ethical also have that, but again, small businesses pay less, so you're outpacing inflation, but you're also getting less money. So it is usually most beneficial to be looking for other employment. It's also nice to compare your options and see what the differences are between different companies and just really get a feel for what's right for you until you have one that's ideal. If you're in a good position, you'll know it. You'll know you're making more than you expect. You'll know that you're making more than what your level of experience typically brings. You'll know that they're treating you better or have better benefits than elsewhere. Usually, you know it's a good deal when you've got it. And if you're not sure, then you probably need to keep searching. Also, if you're not sure, you probably could always do better. So keep going until you've got just the right pinhold. Anyway, so point number two is going to be thinking that I can't save. So even when it felt like I couldn't save, I could, but I'm not going to have that be exactly kind of what I'm drilling home here. What I really want to say here is that I can't not save. When I thought that I didn't have enough money to save, then I would have mishaps where I would be forced to save money. Like my car breaks down and I have to dish out the money even though I don't have it. Situations like that. And sometimes when those situations come up, all of a sudden I'm acquiring loans, which I then can afford later even though I'm making the same amount. And that's kind of interesting because if I can afford that loan, that means I could have afforded to save beforehand. So I can't really afford not to save. I should have just knuckled down and saved up the money beforehand so that I had the money right away instead of paying high interest on loans for mishaps that happened, etc. And also, it can interfere with your work, interfere with you getting to work and keeping a solid job once you have a good job. So the mentality should be that you can't afford not to save. You can even afford to save $20 from each paycheck or $5 from each paycheck. Start with something small. Trust me, it helps. It's better than if you do zero. So even if you're scoffing at that amount, then, well, if you can't afford a big amount and you think that a small amount isn't going to do anything, then look at just think about what is zero going to get you and what do you think 20 will get you. If you can do 20, you're going to get used to it, and then you'll start thinking you can do 20 again, etc. And it keeps building and you get used to it again and again until you're actually saving an appropriate amount to further your goals, or until you find a better job, or it'll at least help you have a smaller loan to take care of whatever it is you need, or for a rainy day when you're just completely tapped out of funds. All right. So point number three is that in my life, before a business and after having a business, I learned that anytime that I want to make more, with the exception of expanding business, which I didn't do until after my 20s, but um, anytime I wanted to make more, I actually made more money by spending less. And it surprised me because I didn't think I could spend less. What I found was that I worked for a whole year. I worked twice as fast. I had that as my minimum. I had to work at least twice as fast as it typically worked to try to earn an additional $1,000 a year when I was a general manager for a restaurant. and I did not get the raise that I wanted. And I saw at that point that it just wasn't going to happen. They were not going to do it. They would do anything to avoid it unless I threatened to leave, and they felt they couldn't replace me with someone of similar class. And honestly, I was too scared to leave because I was worried that they wouldn't take me seriously, even though I was getting good numbers consistently across the board. But the point is, I realized I wasn't going to get that $1,000 a year. So instead, I looked at what I could cut so that I could save more. When I did that, I realized I was purchasing 2 Arizonas a day, and I felt like I needed them because I wanted to stay hydrated, and I did not like water. And the Arizonas at the time were $1 each. So I calculated and found that it was $2 a day, 365 days a year. That makes over $700 a year. And I found 4 other ways to cut and save money. I ended up saving about $5,000 a year just from making those small changes to my everyday life. And I did not notice the changes once I made them. I didn't notice them at all. And I managed to, and also that goes to show the difference that saving $5 to $10 a day makes. Saving $5 to $10 a day ends up adding up to a lot at the end of a year. So I was saving $5,000 a year. That was crazy. Each month there was a few $100 in my account all of a sudden, and I just almost didn't. I forgot where it came from. Even like I said, I didn't notice the change. So um, when I got a business, I also learned this as well. When I tried to earn more money, then people didn't want to pay more money, even if I provided a service that was worth it. However, if I found ways to cut money, people didn't seem to mind, and they seemed to understand that I was trying to budget efficiently and avoid raising the rent, things like that. I not that I wasn't raising the rent to get more money specifically, but I learned that cutting money seemed to be easier, cause less problems, and it's certainly more in your control as well. Usually, getting more money involves convincing someone else to give it to you, and people don't want to give that up because they're probably trying to get money just like you. But if you find ways that you can save money, usually if you decide, oh, I'm not going to spend money on this thing anymore, then that is in your control, and usually that's a lot easier. So it's typically easier to save money than it is to make more money. So if anyone applied these tips, then I'm sure they would be on their way to either starting a business or to purchasing their own home, because that's what I did. Within a few months, I then purchased my first property, and and then moved on from there and started my business soon after. So I hope this gets you ready to go into your 30s with some oomph and with the tools that you need. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this helps someone out there, and you have a wonderful day.